Okay, so in the first video of this chapter, I started to mention a little bit about damages and the fact that these tort cases, the idea was let's make the person whole again, let's give them what they lost in the course of the accident. And this comes under something that is called our compensatory damages. And compensatory damages are then broken into two subcategories, one being special damages and one being general damages. Now, our special damages are what I talked to you about at the very beginning of the first video. These are your medical expenses, lost wages, in a car accident, repairs to your cars, things that are very specific, very quantifiable. And there's no dispute really as far as what a hospital bill is, what the car repairs may have been. Those are set figures, and again, they're there. Then once we get past those special damages, we get into what's called our general damages, and this is where you may consider pain and suffering. If you were injured, the idea of how are you going to be able to lift things, or if you're a parent and you're supposed to be lifting your young child and your back was injured, you can no longer lift. That pain and suffering is something that's going to go on for a long, long time, and you are going to want to get compensated for that. There's not a monetary dollar amount that says I'm losing $3.50 every time I can't lift my child from the ground up into my arms, but the court will set a price for that. You also look at things like emotional pain and suffering, things such as your loss of reputation, mental or loss of impairment of mental or physical capacity. You can also receive money for the inability to have physical relationships anymore if that is something that is caused by injury. All of those things fall under what is called the general damages, things that aren't quantifiable easily, but that a jury or a judge would put a monetary amount to give you to make life easier. The other form of damages that get paid out is something called punitive damages. And these damages are to punish the wrongdoer, the person you sue. If they did something intentional. And many of you may be familiar with an old case of a woman that went through a McDonald's drive-through and spilled coffee in her lap and burned herself. There was a lawsuit about that came through, and I'm going to really wrap this story up into a short story. But McDonald's brewed their coffee at a temperature hotter than the machines were set up to brew coffee at. They had changed the machines to brew the coffee at a higher temperature. And what the judge and the jury did was assign a punitive damage award to McDonald's for modifying the machine to brew coffee at a hotter temperature, with the hopes that that punishment, that multi-million-dollar amount, would deter other people from doing the same thing. So punitive damages are designed to scare others from following the wrongdoings of the person that got caught. And that's very important to understand. So this is where we look at and we talk about intentional torts. When something happens that is not intentional, becomes unintentional, you end up in a thing called negligence, is the name for unintentional torts. And when we talk about negligence, we talk about the failure to exercise a standard of care that a reasonable person would exercise. And in your readings, in your studies of this chapter, you're going to hear about this reasonable person quite often. And this is a standard the court has set up that basically says, what would Joe Citizen do in this case? What are the normal things that would be expected? And if it is something that is normal, that is expected, then there's a duty of care to take of that person. And negligence is making sure that we take care of that reasonable person. For instance, if you have a store, you don't want to have broken glass on the floor, even though your sign may say shoes are required to enter the store. It's still reasonable that someone's going to have a very flimsy shoe, a very thin-soled shoe, something else, and having glass on the floor is not taking care of your customer. And there's a strong likelihood that someone would step on that piece of glass, that piece of glass would go through their flip-flop or thinly soled shoe, and it would cut the bottom of their foot. And that would be negligence by that business owner. So when we talk about negligence, and in this big world, in this big term, we talk about 4 specific elements. Element 1 is duty. And what that means is every business has a duty of care. You have to keep your business, keep your property safe in the case of anyone else coming onto it. You can't dig a huge hole in your backyard, not turn on any lights, invite 25 people over to your backyard, and then be shocked when someone sues you when they fall into that huge hole and break their leg. You have a duty to keep them safe from dangers like that. Then the second part of this is breach. If you fail in your duty to keep someone safe, you are breaching that duty. And those go hand in hand. Our third is causation. When we talk about causation was your breach of duty the cause of their harm? So having a hole in the middle of your backyard, no lights on it, the person who fell into it wouldn't have broken their leg except for there being a dark hole, unlit hole in the back of your yard. That's causation. Now, if your back door was locked to the patio and there was a fence in your backyard that said, you can't go past this fence, and this person unlocked the back door and they climbed over the fence and then they fell in the hole, is the hole that was unlit the cause of their harm? No. The cause of their harm was going somewhere where they weren't supposed to go. So causation talks about how the injured party's actions tie to the injury. And our final thing for negligence is what's called damages. And when we talk about damages, there has to be an injury. It can't just be that you were embarrassed. There has to be an injury required to sue for negligence. So to recap real quick, negligence has to have a duty, a breach, causation, and damages. All 4 of those must be met in order for there to be negligence. And we're going to talk about some other things in video number 3 that deal with negligence and situations that come up with this.